I'd like to introduce a remarkable individual. His name's Les Muma. He's a retired CEO of a company called Fiserv. May not be a company you ever heard of because it's not headquartered here, but it got its start here, and Les was the one who started. Les is a dynamic philanthropist. But what I'd like to tell you first is a story about love. A love story about philanthropy. Les and Pam Muma grew up in Winter Haven, Florida, near here. They both went to college at the University of South Florida. They dated, fell in love, got married. After college, Les went to work for a local bank running its data processing center and its technology center. In the early 1980s, that bank was merged, and Les found out that they were probably going to sell that data center, and he was probably going to be out of a job. Well, you know, funny things happen when you're faced with a career change that dramatic. And necessity is the mother of invention. Les came up with an alternative strategy. He said, you know, if they're going to sell this, what are they selling it for? And maybe we can buy it. Of course, he didn't have a lot of money, but he did put together a group of folks, and they talked about basically mortgaging everything they could and borrow whatever they could, and perhaps bringing in some investors. And the idea began to take shape. So they're looking at taking on an enormous amount of debt. We're talking about millions of dollars. And Les's wife, Pam, went to discuss this with her father. And her father sat and listened to it. And she said, what do you think? He said, I think you should divorce him. Because he's going bankrupt. And you'll go down with him. The good news is she didn't divorce Les. And over the years, Les built that small company into a medium-sized company, merged with a larger company in Milwaukee. Les and Pam moved to Milwaukee, and then they built this company, Fiserv, into one of the leading technology and data management service companies that service financial institutions around the world. And that includes such things like online banking or mobile banking. If any of you have ever done any of that, then you've done business with Fiserv. It is now a public company, $5 billion in revenues, 21,000 employees around the world, and 160 global locations. In 2005, Les retired, and he and Pam moved back to their roots. They came home to the Tampa Bay area. Les got very involved with the University of South Florida Foundation. He chaired that foundation, and he led the very successful $600 million unstoppable capital campaign. And he did it during a recession. So Les knows fundraising, but he and Pam also are among the most dynamic and generous philanthropists in our community. And Les is here to discuss philanthropy. In fact, you might say that Les and Pam wrote the book on philanthropy and fundraising. And the subtitle might be, How to Share the Love. I'd like to introduce Les Muma.
Not only didn't she divorce me, she's here today, which I'm glad. Thank you for the introduction, and I'll try to at least cover part of what Jeff indicated I could. My comments today are going to be divided into three areas. First, I'm going to comment a little bit on fundraising, not as much as I was, because Judy touched on a lot of the same points that I had intended to touch on. I'm then going to talk about the philanthropist. What makes the philanthropist tick? What is he thinking, and why does he give, is what I'm going to try to identify. I think it's very important for fundraisers to understand the philanthropist and what he's all about. And then lastly, I'm going to touch on what I see, and I should say we see, as a shift in major gifts towards planned giving, estate planned giving. And I'll talk a little about that and the opportunities I see there. But before I get into those 3 points, I'd like to lay a foundation, if you will, by giving you 4 thoughts that I have on philanthropy. The first thought's really just the definition of philanthropy. If you look in the dictionary, Webster defines philanthropy as the desire to help mankind as indicated by acts of charity, by love of mankind, by service, and by gifting. A very short, very concise, very accurate definition, it covers giving of time, talent, and treasure. The second thought I'd like to lay down as part of the foundation is something that I believe very, very strongly in personally, and that is, as we as human beings, especially human beings who were fortunate enough to be born and grow up and live in this country, have a moral obligation to share our time, our talent, and our treasures to the degree we can with those people less fortunate than we are. And I think somebody mentioned earlier today that the United States is by far leads the world in philanthropy from any way you measure it on a nation-by-nation basis. So I think we are living that particular feeling of mine. The third thought I'd like to lay as a foundation is that philanthropy, the giving of money, the giving of time, talent, and treasure, is not something that can be easily taught. I believe that skill set is caught, not taught. We learn philanthropy by watching others. Now, maybe it was our parents or our grandparents. Maybe it was the company you worked for early in your career. But more likely, it is watching other people in the community who are philanthropic, who give money back. You can see the value that they give to mankind. You can also see I like to call it a giving high that the philanthropist gets when he participates in philanthropy. And then the fourth thought, in the way of a foundation, is simply that philanthropy, the giving of time, talent, and treasure, is an activity that snowballs. It's caught and then it snowballs. And by that I mean the first time we get involved in a philanthropic activity, a service generally, and it's our time that we're giving, maybe time and talent. It feels good. We get involved again, maybe with that same cause or maybe with a different cause, and it feels better. And then we continue to increase the time and talent, and as we get financial capability, we start giving treasure, and it just kind of snowballs over time. To the true philanthropist, it becomes a part of who he is, part of his fabric of life. He just lives the philanthropic activity as part of what he or she does in life. So that by way of foundation, now I'd like to start on those 3 points. And this first one, raising funds, I'm going to spend a little less time on because I think Judy did a good job of touching on several of them. But let me give you a little bit of background first. First of all, I was not involved in fundraising at all until really 2002, 2003. But my wife and I have been involved in philanthropy for some time. And I'll give you a little bit of history on that, but right now, suffice it to say that from prior to 2002, I was running a publicly traded company that was growing very rapidly, and I probably traveled 3 to 5 days a week. I probably worked 70 or 80 hours a week. And Pam would argue with both of those numbers and want to increase them, but I worked a lot. But during that time, I encouraged Pam because I knew she had the passion for philanthropy and for getting involved. And so I watched and encouraged Pam in her fundraising. And you might say that I live vicariously through Pam's fundraising for many, many years. And she did a very, very good job of that. But as 2003 approached, and I told Fiserv's board that I planned to retire in 2006, I started to back away a little bit from a lot of the detail of the company that I had run for 35 years, and turn it over to my potential CEO replacements. And it gave me time then to step out in the community and to get involved in fundraising myself. And as I did that, I first of all chaired an $800,000 Junior Achievement annual campaign. The following year, I chaired a $10 million campaign for the United Performing Arts Fund. And the following year, I chaired a $35 million annual campaign for United Way of Greater Milwaukee. So I kind of got my teeth into fundraising in really giving back, if you will, to the state of Wisconsin and the city of Milwaukee for providing a great place for Pam and I to grow a company. But after I retired and moved back to Florida, I was already on USF's foundation board, They had reached out and put a hook in me while I was still working in Wisconsin. So I had intended to get involved with USF when I came back. And I got a phone call after I got more active with the foundation board. I got a phone call from a gentleman by the name of Frank Morsani, who said, we're starting a campaign. I'm a co-chair. I'm looking for another co-chair to join me. Would you consider being a co-chair with me on this campaign? And, you know, I said, well, how big is it going to be? And he lied about that a little bit. And eventually I said, sure, I'll give it a run. And Frank and I worked together for about 2.5 years on this, what turned out to be a $600 million campaign. About 2.5 years into it, Frank was having some issues, family issues back in Oklahoma, so he asked to step down. I told him he could only step down as co-chair if he was always available to me for advice and for introducing me to people, and he did a wonderful job doing that for me in the campaign. But that campaign's now finished. It has changed. They added $400 million to it. It's now a $1 billion campaign. $600 million is raised. Another $400 million is being raised. You can tell by the relaxed look on my face and the sparkle in my eyes and my smile, I'm not the chair anymore. I'm off doing other things, but I'm still very, very involved. But from the USF campaign, the Unstoppable campaign, I learned a tremendous amount. And I just want to touch on 4 things that I think are key in fundraising, any kind of fundraising. The first one I'll just mention because Judy talked about it, and that is the passion for the cause. All people must have passion for the cause. Certainly the leaders and the people on the staff do. But when you bring volunteers into it, make sure that they are just as passionate. Make sure that they, I like to say, have drunk the Kool-Aid. Everybody's in this thing together. The second thing I think is very important, especially when you transition from smaller gifts to larger gifts. And I would classify a larger gift as $25,000, $50,000 and above, not necessarily million and multi-million-dollar gifts. But what happens in the fundraising process, it changes what you're doing. You're no longer asking for money to help your cause advance itself. What you're doing from that point forward is you're looking for a philanthropist, somebody who has money, somebody who has a history of giving, getting to know that philanthropist, getting to know what his passions are, what his sweet spots are, what his or her dreams are, and hopefully you match up your cause with those passions of the philanthropist. If they don't match, you probably should go look for another philanthropist, because you'll find out that philanthropists stay focused on a passion of theirs. If it matches, then you're no longer really asking for money. You're satisfying the need of a man, a woman, or a couple who have a need to make that passion fulfilled. And you're going to fulfill that passion for them. It becomes much easier to raise money once you get to that point. What I'm saying is that in successful fundraising, especially larger gift fundraising, the donor is more fulfilled and happier than the organization that's raising the money. I know that's hard to believe, but I've never seen a case when a philanthropist didn't give a large gift that he's more fulfilled than the charity that he's servicing. It's very, very true. I'll just give you a quick example. Pam and I, when we moved back to Tampa, got very involved with USF and TGH to provide some seed money and then help raise money to build a new neonatal care unit. And I can assure you that the money that we gave was not given because of some professional, well-timed, well-pointed presentation and ask, though we had all of those. We gave the money because we wanted to fulfill a need we had to remember our daughter who we lost in the neonatal care unit 30-plus years prior to that. So certainly the money we gave helped USF. USF, we funded a chair. We funded a cell lab at University of South Florida. We funded the infrastructure for the neonatal care unit. We gave the seed money to Tampa General to begin the construction of the neonatal care unit, and then Pam and I worked tirelessly to raise the rest of that money. So they both benefited, but who really benefited from that is Pam and I did, because that neonatal care unit is the Jennifer Lee Muma care unit. That's fundraising. And it was kind of amazing. The first meeting we had with Tampa General, they had this presentation put together, and a good part of the board was there, and they said, they threw out a number that they thought it would take for the naming right, and we basically doubled it. So that's how you raise money. And then another point I'd like to make is, over the long haul, any nonprofit, any not-for-profit organization must track results, must track outcomes. You must be able to go back to a donor and show the donor that this is the money you gave, this is what you wanted to accomplish, we accomplished that and more. You've got to prove that your organization, the giving of gifts to your organization will result in tangible, measurable results tied to that money. Very, very important. And fourth and last, and probably a simple one, but one I think we all need to remember, and that is that when you're starting a new campaign and you're looking for new donors, quite often the donors that you're looking for are your existing donor base. And this gets into the whole topic of stewardship and taking care. I like to say it's the care and feeding of the donor base. You have to keep them close to you. Now, it varies widely depending on the philanthropist, the donor. Some of the donors expect to be coddled or to be entertained or to be constantly thanked for the money they give. But the real philanthropist, what he or she or they are looking for is the friendships that's created with the people in the organization who is satisfying a passion that they have. They want information flow back and forth so they know what's going on in that organization. And they want to be asked for advice on an ongoing basis. If you're doing that with a philanthropist, when your next campaign's ready to go, they'll be right there with you. And you'll see time and time again, a philanthropist will give $1 million, and the next time he'll give $5 million, and the next time he'll give $10 million. So not only does it continue, it increases. And then one last thing I like to do on fundraising, because Jeff asked me to, and he gave me such a nice introduction, I feel like I should fulfill what he asked. He said, a lot of people wonder, how in the world USF raised $600 million, and actually we raised $620 million, right in the middle of a recession, one of the worst recessions the country had had in years and years. And it's pretty easy, simple, not easy, but simple how we pulled it off. And the first thing I would say, a lot of people would say, the thing I did best for USF was to chair their campaign. Not true. What I did best for USF is I teamed up with Judy Genshaft, the President Judy Genshaft, and convinced Joel Momberg to leave All Children's Hospital in St. Pete and join USF. Leadership. Leadership's very important. I would also say that we had a campaign cabinet during this 7-year campaign. And the campaign cabinet, first, institution of higher learning is very complex. So our cabinet was made up of an individual from every campus, from every college on every campus. So for the athletics, medicine, engineering, business, the arts, every one of them had a representative on the campaign cabinet. And then we matched all of those up with a volunteer from the community who had the same passion that was either the campus or the college. And we had meetings, 3 meetings a year, sometimes 4 meetings a year for the 7 years. And we ran those meetings, or I should say I ran those meetings. The only way I knew how to run them is like a sales meeting. I looked at, first of all, we took our $600 million and we broke it up and assigned it to every one of these units. So they all had a goal. Might be a $10 million goal, might be a $120 million goal, but they all had a goal. We then met on a quarterly basis and went around the room to every single reporting unit and had them say what they've accomplished since the last time we met, what they plan to do between now and the next meeting, how close they are to their goal. If we're 30% through the campaign, you should be 30% to your goal. And we touched base on those and we tracked that every quarter. It was at first intimidating to the people because they had the idea, hey, I'm a volunteer, get off my back. But it was important to have accountability. And in the long run, they all enjoyed it. It got competitive. People came to that meeting and we celebrated successes. They helped the unit next to them who wasn't doing as well with ideas so they could raise money. And I think it was the combination of the leadership and this cabinet and how the cabinet responded that pushed us through that recession. Now, that's not saying they didn't come to one meeting and say, you know, guys, we ought to think about maybe backing this sucker down to $500 million or $400 million. Let's not go the full 600. But we knew the university needed $600 million in their plans, and so we stuck with our guns, and we got through it. And it was a lot of fun in the process. Raising money, I look out to this group, and I can tell you raising money isn't always easy. I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. It's a team activity. It requires planning, it requires tenacity, and it requires leadership. But I'll tell you, it's very, very rewarding, not only to the not-for-profit, but for the people that are involved in the process. It's very rewarding. I thank everybody in this room for what they do in fundraising. You are certainly a part of why this country is one of the most giving countries from a philanthropic standpoint, the most giving country in the world. And you're also making Tampa Bay area a better place to live, and I thank you for that. The second point I'd like to talk about is the philanthropists. How they think and why they give is kind of what I'm trying to touch on here. And I believe that in knowing the philanthropist, Pam and I are involved in fundraising. We're also philanthropists. We have an advantage. We know how the philanthropist thinks and acts, and I think that helps us measurably in raising money. So let me try to share with you a little bit about a philanthropist. My goal here was to pick a philanthropist, maybe you know, maybe you didn't know, and kind of take he or she apart and let you see how they think so you can get on the inside of their thought process. And I chose, after a lot of thought, the Mumas as the philanthropist I was going to pick on. And there were some reasons for that. We're certainly not the best-known philanthropists. We're not the largest philanthropists in the area. We've only been at it for a while. But I think we are typical. We are passionate about the things that we're passionate about, and I think we're a typical philanthropist. And another reason is I know it's best, and I only had to ask one person that I have some minor control over, and she let me do it. So let me give you a little bit about Pam and Les. We have been married for 50 years. January of next year, we will have been married for 50 years. So I am 70. 50 years ago, I was 20 when we got married. Pam was much, much younger than I am and still is. But people say we grew up together, and in fact, we did grow up together. But we have been giving back in some way for a very long time. If you go clear back into high school, Pam was involved in service organizations where she got out and worked philanthropic activities in the community. In high school, I was a little bit more concentrated on sports, basketball. I wanted to become an NBA player. I didn't, but I wanted to become one. But Pam was in philanthropy. But then in college at University of South Florida, I was involved with a fraternity. As a matter of fact, I started a local fraternity. There were no nationals on campus back then, so I started a fraternity. And in starting the fraternity, the 8 of us that started it got to put together the goals and the objectives of that fraternity. And a lot of them had to do with philanthropy and giving back to the community. So Pam and I were very involved with the fraternity during college life and gave back. But where we really caught the philanthropy bug is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Though Pam didn't like living in Milwaukee all that much, it is a very giving, very philanthropic environment. A lot of old money in that town from the old companies, and very unselfish families giving money back to the community. That's where we caught the bug. I would also add to that, when we moved back to Florida and I met Frank and Carol Morsani, that is certainly another couple who really epitomizes philanthropy. If you look up philanthropy in the dictionary, their picture ought to be by that word, because they are very, very good at what they do. But like most philanthropists, just a little bit of history on Pam and myself, we started slow. We started by giving of time primarily, and then time and talent. And then as we got more resources and got into the being involved financially, it was really without knowing it. During the time we were giving time and talent, we started forming our strategy, where we wanted to give, where were our hot buttons, where our passions were. And we had been involved with American Cancer Society. We had been involved with a lot of children's causes, All Children's Hospital in Milwaukee. we were involved with Junior Achievement, both of us, for years, Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We were also got very involved with USF, and our initial give back to USF was they gave us the foundation educationally and socially to build a career that made us successful. We owe those people something. So those are the things we were doing. And so our hot buttons as a family of givers, Pam and myself, is centered around kids, infants to young adults, one area. Second area is health care for kids, also for cancer, always aimed at those less fortunate. And finally, education, developing tomorrow's leaders. Part of that came out of my work at Fiserv, as Jeff was talking about. Growing a large company is so important that you have new leaders coming along. But that education thing was also fueled by JA and USF. So knowing the Mumas, which you now know a little bit about us, you probably could have learned that over a lunch or a dinner or something. You know what our goals and our passions are. So it should be no surprise about where we give most of our money. Now, it isn't that we don't give money elsewhere, but nothing major, nothing long term. It's always in the sweet spot. And if you're approaching the Mumas, or any philanthropist for that matter, for a gift that is outside of his passion, it's an uphill battle, if not impossible, to get that money. That's why I say, if you're going to hook up with a philanthropist, make sure they think like you do. Make sure the passions are the same. The key point to remember is all philanthropists have a strategy, have in mind what they want to accomplish and where they want to give back. Fundraisers need to meet the philanthropists, get to know them, get to understand them. A lot you can just research on the internet. If it doesn't match up, go find another philanthropist until you find one that hooks. And then from that point forward, raising money gets much easier because all you're doing is satisfying the need that the philanthropist has. The third and last topic I wanted to touch on was a trend that I'm seeing, and I should say we are seeing, in a shift in major gifts from the traditional giving patterns more towards planned giving. And we're seeing that, I'm seeing it in USF Unstoppable campaign. There have been more planned gifts at USF in the past 2 years than there were in the previous probably 4 or 5 years. And there's a pipeline right now of additional planned gifts at USF. So we're seeing it grow out there. Pam and I are also seeing our philanthropist friends and acquaintances starting to think planned giving more than they ever have before. And Pam and I are also in that same thought process. Now, this is not necessarily the billionaire families or the multimillionaire families that are leaning this way, though some of them are. But it is the new millionaire. I like to call them new money millionaires, or if you will, minor millionaires. Maybe people with net worths of $10 to $200 million, just to pick some numbers, that I think are leaning towards what I'm talking about here. And what has built their wealth in almost all cases is either the dot-com companies, these companies that came out, went public and grew. And also, but just by the vibrant stock market, you saw the graph that Steve showed with that stock market going up, and then it has its ups and downs, but it's still trending up. And it's also fueled by the fact that public companies today, the young new public companies, have a affinity to give stock options, stock grants, and restricted stock much deeper into the company than old companies used to. The wealth was at the top, everybody else was workers. Today it goes down much deeper. And let me just give you a personal example there. At Fiserv, which is a company I co-founded, we were started as a merger of two companies in 1984. We grew for a couple of years with venture capital. We then went public in 1986. In 1986, we had about 480 employees. We gave every single employee stock options before we went public. Some of them we had to convince that stock options weren't bad things. They were good things, and we had to sell it, but everybody had stock options. We then grew the company over 20 years, 25 years that I was there after going public. And when I retired, Fiserv had 23,000 employees. Now, of the 23,000 employees, 70% own stock in the company, either via a grant or an option or the stock purchase program that we had, or profit sharing or whatever. A lot of owners. There were, I would say, roughly, let's say 1,500 to 2,000 junior and senior managers. They had a lot of stock options because they were granted stock options as part of their compensation plans. So heavy stock ownership is the point I'm trying to make. If I look back at Fiserv today, there are probably 150 to 200 millionaires created by that one company. Now, we grew from very small to a $10 billion market cap company, but we're one of many companies who did that same thing. And I would say there are probably 20 to 25 serious millionaires that are either still in Fiserv or have gone on and retired. Point is, Fiserv is one story like this. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of these new, and I think a statistic was given that the millionaires had tripled. This is what's fueling it. Now let me back up and just talk a minute about historically how families gave in the past. They'd make small, medium, and relatively large gifts during their lifetime. The wealthy family would. They would give their heirs, their kids and their grandkids, huge amounts of money, sometime when they turned 18, sometime when they turned 21, or when the couple passed away, the inheritance would be passed on. Just keep that in thought and mind, because that's changing a little bit too. And then upon the time when both of the family members that made the wealth passed on, they'd give some inheritance to family members. The rest of the money would drop into a family foundation. And the family foundation was run either by the family members or by professionals to give money away on an ongoing basis, and not always in the same spirit that the original family that raised the money. The new money millionaires are different. Let me just give you, they do give money as they live. They give small and medium and large gifts during their lifetime. They pass money on to their heirs differently in that their plan is to, I'm going to make sure my kids are successful. I'm going to give them enough money so they can get started on what they're getting started on. I'm going to give them loans, if that makes more sense, to help them build their own wealth themselves. But I'm not going to make them instant millionaires. And I think Warren Buffett says it best. Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway says, give your kids enough so they can do whatever they want, but not enough so they can do nothing. And I think that's very, very important. And I think and why this is happening, I think, in the new millionaires is because most of those people earned it themselves. They didn't get it passed on. So they're not passing it on in the same way. So when the new millionaire last to die happens, I hate talking like that because my wife gives me a dirty look every time I tell last to die. She will be the last to die, I'm sure. I've often said women don't have heart attacks, they give them. But that's another topic. When these new money millionaires pass on as a couple, they will pass reasonable inheritance on to their kids. Again, enough so that they're comfortable and safe and bulletproof when they retire, but again, not enough so they can do nothing. They will form foundations probably, but much smaller. Maybe some of them won't do foundations at all. And I think what you're seeing them do is move towards planned giving. And these planned gifts are transformational size gifts, big gifts. And let me define real quick planned giving for you, although I'm sure 99% of you know it. It's a contract signed between the donor and the not-for-profit that says when the second to die of the couple passes on, X number of dollars will go to that not-for-profit. Now, most of those agreements also say that during the first 5 years or 10 years, a part of that money. So let's say it's a $50 million gift, and during the first 5 or 10 years after the contract is signed, they'll fund the first $5 million of it over the first 5 years or 10 years. But then the big nut comes at the end when they both pass on. This is the type gift that we're starting to see grow. And this type gift's going to impact family foundations, it's going to impact heirs, it's going to impact philanthropists, and it's going to impact nonprofits. I've already said family foundations are going to be smaller, and I think they will. Heirs are not going to be instant millionaires. They're going to be comfortable because that's really more of the giving, the Buffett example. The philanthropist really benefits because the philanthropist now gets to see the transformational gift that might have been given out of his foundation, given to where he wants it given, and he gets to enjoy it. He or she or they get to enjoy the success of that gift. And the nonprofit, I think, are going to get money they may not have gotten before because they've nailed it down while the couple was still alive and the passion was still alive. And they are going to be able to celebrate that transformational gift with the donor during the donor's lifetime. I think that is very, very important. Planned giving is not new. I think it's growing. I think it's something that you ought to learn about. I think you ought to plan for it. I think you can benefit from it. I'm saying that to everybody in this room. It's an opportunity for all not-for-profits. And I have a closing thought that I give when I give almost any speech, especially if it has to do with charity. And a little bit of my thunder was stolen by Judy when she talked earlier, because she said that this came from Frank Morsani, which it did. But life is divided into thirds. I believe very strongly in that. The first third, we learn. We're in school, we're in college, we're learning while we're at work in our early careers. The second third, we earn. And by earn, that's when we're raising a family, educating our kids, buying houses, doing that. But we're also building a nest egg. Always building a nest egg, if prudent. So you learn, then you earn, and in the final third of your life, you return. And that's the moral obligation we have to give back. Treasure, if you have it, at the very least, time and talent is very important. Pam and I are clearly in the return phase of our life. We love our busy retirement, and we've learned that free time is really overrated because we don't have much of it. We're very involved. We love our involvement with nonprofits. We love sharing our nest egg with companies or nonprofits that are in our area of passion. I thank you for your time and your interest today, and I also thank you for being involved with nonprofit. It is clearly one of the most noble careers anybody can choose. God bless you all. God bless the USA, and God bless the free enterprise system. It works.